murdering his mother-in-law with 37 stab wounds, even severing part of her hand. This is what the son-in-law Raymond Lam did. He hired a hitman and even injured himself to mislead the investigation. Although he thought everything was perfectly planned, a single blood stain unintentionally exposed him. The body under the stove case in Pingchao officially begins. This was the first case of a body being hidden under a stove in Hong Kong, a story that shook the entire city. The investigation was a tense battle of wits between detectives and the murderer. What was the relationship between the mother-in-law and the son-in-law? What was the root cause of everything? Follow the story to uncover the dark truth behind this crime. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep up with future cases. Crime scene setting: Pingchao, a small island in Hong Kong, surrounded by the vast sea. On November 6, 1959, at 11 p.m., a piercing scream rang out from the fishball noodle shop Raymond's Noodles at number 14 on Wing-On Street. Mr. Chow, an elderly security guard, was on his way home when he stopped in his tracks after hearing the scream for help. By instinct, he rushed towards the source of the scream. Inside the shop, Raymond Lam was kneeling on the floor, trembling, holding a cleaning rag. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. "My mother-in-law, she attacked me. I'm injured. She ran away." Raymond Lam stammered, showing his injured foot to Mr. Chow. A few minutes later, curious neighbors started gathering and whispering about what had happened. Victoria Wong, Raymond Lam's mother-in-law, was infamous for being quarrelsome, so Mr. Chow and others advised Raymond to report to the police, but he seemed hesitant due to family ties. That night, the neighborhood gradually returned to its usual routine. Only one person remained restless, whispered Chow. He felt that something was off. The scream from Raymond Lam's shop didn't sound like that of someone being attacked. He recalled the voice, high-pitched, shaky, like a woman's. At dawn on November 7, 1959, Mr. Chow coincidentally encountered Raymond Lam on the street. He looked pale and nervous. He said he was going out to buy bread. Since they were going in the same direction, Mr. Chow walked with him. But halfway, he changed his mind and returned to the shop to cook his own noodles. In truth, this was not a coincidence. After the previous night's events, Mr. Chow suspected that Raymond Lam was hiding something and deliberately observed him. Before leaving, he again advised Raymond to report to the police. That afternoon, Raymond approached Mr. Chow. He appeared deep in thought. After a long silence, he said he had thought carefully about Mr. Chow's advice and decided to report the incident to the police. Since Pingchao had no police station, Raymond Lam had to travel a long distance to Chungchao to file a report. The police listened to his statement. After receiving his statement, the police asked Raymond to return home so they could investigate. He left, returning to his fishball noodle shop and continuing business as usual. That afternoon, a group of police officers from Chungchao arrived in Pingchao to search for Victoria Wong. They scoured the neighborhood, asking around, but no one had seen her since the night of the incident. Finding no trace of Victoria Wong, the police returned to Raymond's shop. They needed a more thorough examination of the scene where the attack allegedly took place. Initially, they assumed this was just an assault case, but upon entering the shop, an eerie feeling took over. The air was damp, a fishy smell lingered, and small reddish stains remained on the floor despite being cleaned. Raymond calmly explained that it was his own blood from the attack. But upon comparing it to the wound on his leg, the police noticed something suspicious. A small cut, only about 5 centimeters long, which couldn't have bled enough to stain the floor. Moreover, the bloodstains didn't appear as if they had dripped from a wound. They resembled marks from a struggle or a much more severe attack than what was claimed. The police went upstairs to inspect the attic. There, they found a dish soaking a blood-stained cloth. They asked Raymond why the cloth was there. He casually responded that he had used it to bandage his wound, and then washed it to avoid waste. If his statement was true, why was the water in the dish still deep red? Blood clots quickly, but the stains on the cloth had not dried completely, as if it had been soaked not long ago. Continuing their search, they entered the bedroom. As soon as they stepped in, one officer immediately stopped. On the headboard, dried bloodstains had seeped into the bedding. When questioned, Raymond gave an unbelievable explanation. It was his wife's menstrual blood from before. The officers were momentarily stunned, but quickly realized this was just an excuse. A large, smeared dried bloodstain could not possibly be menstrual blood. There were too many inconsistencies in Raymond's story. They no longer considered this just an assault case. However, without concrete evidence, they could only summon Mary Lam, Raymond Lam's wife, for questioning. When she arrived at the police station, Mary Lam appeared tense and confused. She claimed she had been ill that day, went to bed early, and was unaware of what had happened. During the interrogation, Raymond Lam repeatedly appeared at the police station, urging his wife to return home. He tried to act calm, but his impatient gaze and pressured tone raised suspicions. His behavior only deepened the police's doubts. They started connecting the dots. The large amount of blood in the shop, Raymond's illogical minor injury, and now the suspicious actions of both husband and wife. The police suspected that Raymond had murdered his mother-in-law, Victoria Wang, and injured himself to fake being the victim. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. They had no solid evidence. Unable to detain Mary Lam for long, they had to let her go. The next day, November 8th, the police returned to Raymond's fishball noodle shop to continue their investigation. This time, they meticulously checked every corner of the shop. They searched all the wardrobes, checked under the beds, but found no clear evidence. There was no body, no murder weapon, only a large amount of blood scattered across the shop. As the officers were about to leave, a young policeman had an idea. Check the stove, the place where the shop's soup was cooked daily. Stepping into the kitchen, he noticed a large pot placed on the stove, divided into 2 layers, with steam billowing from it. When he lifted the lid, a strong, putrid stench filled the air, causing the officers to cover their noses. One of them frowned and moved closer. Peering inside, a horrifying sight unfolded. Amidst the murky water, a portion of a human body, pale and grayish, was visible. The entire police team was stunned. One officer reflexively stepped back, shouting in shock. There was a body inside. They immediately pulled the pot down and uncovered the stove. A large burlap sack was wedged between the stove's layers. The shape inside was unmistakable. Upon opening the sack, they found a woman's body tightly wrapped, bearing multiple wounds. There was no doubt. This was the corpse of Victoria Wang, the mother-in-law who had been missing for days. The police immediately sealed off the crime scene. One officer found Raymond Lam's fingerprints on a knife discarded near the stove, a large knife still covered in dried blood. Additionally, they found black ashes in the kitchen. When questioned, Raymond stammered that he had been burning old documents. But the police didn't believe him. After analyzing the ashes, they found traces of burned fabric, possibly blood-stained clothing he had tried to destroy. The police concluded that Raymond had deliberately burned the blood-stained clothes and evidence to cover his tracks. There was no doubt. Raymond Lam was the killer. He was immediately arrested on suspicion of murder. In the interrogation room, faced with undeniable evidence, Raymond initially stubbornly denied everything. But under pressure from investigators, he began to waver. After hours of psychological confrontation, he broke down. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice trembled, and he confessed everything. The motive was money. He and his mother-in-law, Victoria Wang, had a fierce argument. She demanded more money from him, but he refused. In a fit of rage, Victoria Wang insulted him, calling him a useless, impoverished man unworthy of being her daughter's husband. Her harsh words pushed Raymond over the edge, and he lost control, murdering his mother-in-law. The murder weapon was the knife the police had found. However, he didn't act alone. He had an accomplice. Initially, they considered dumping the body into the sea, but fearing discovery, they decided to hide it inside the shop. The large stove became the perfect hiding place. He stuffed the body into a sack, dragged it to the stove, placed it underneath, and carefully concealed it. To mask the stench, he added pepper, salt, and burned the blood-stained clothing. After cleaning up the bloodstains, he created a wound on his leg and fabricated the story of being attacked by his mother-in-law to mislead the investigation. But the inconsistencies in his statements were quickly noticed by the police. The truth had come to light. Raymond Lam had no choice but to confess his crime. However, to fully understand the cause of this tragedy, we must go back in time to examine the relationship between the victim and the killer. Victoria Wang, 45 years old, was born in Huilufeng, Guangdong Province, into a poor family. She was once the concubine of a man in mainland China. After giving birth to her first daughter, Mary Lam, her first husband passed away, leaving her a lonely widow. She later remarried another man and moved to Hong Kong, where she had another daughter. But her second marriage was also far from perfect. The second husband did not like life in Hong Kong, so he returned to the mainland, leaving Victoria Wang and her two daughters stranded in Pingchao. Victoria took on the burden of the family, doing various manual labor jobs to support her two daughters. Life was full of hardship and scarcity. Her eldest daughter, Mary Lam, had to work as a factory worker at the Great China Match Factory when she became an adult. The younger daughter was still in school, adding to the financial burden on Victoria. Her biggest hope was that both daughters could marry wealthy men to change their fate. That's why she was actively seeking matchmaking opportunities for her eldest daughter. A few years before the murder, Mary Lam was introduced to Raymond Lam, who was in his early 30s at the time. Raymond came from a poor background. He had worked as a laborer in a fishball factory before saving enough money to open a fishball noodle shop in Pingchao. At first, he ran the business with a colleague, Vincent, but later Vincent withdrew his investment, leaving Raymond to manage the shop alone. When he met Mary Lam, they dated for a few months, found they were compatible, and decided to get married. But this marriage wasn't just about love. Victoria Wang set clear conditions for her future son-in-law. She demanded that Raymond provide her with 30 Hong Kong dollars per month, ensuring that she would never lack spending money. Raymond reluctantly agreed, knowing that if he wanted a wife, he had to accept the terms. After the wedding, Victoria continued to make more demands, further interfering in her son-in-law's life. Raymond complied with all of Victoria's marriage conditions, including an extravagant wedding banquet, a bride price, and monthly financial support. She demanded 5 banquet tables, a gold necklace, an expensive watch, and several $100s as a wedding gift. After getting married, Mary Lam quit her job at the match factory and started helping her husband run the fishball noodle shop. Raymond kept his promise, sending $30 to his mother-in-law every month while also paying for the younger daughter's school fees. Although Victoria didn't live with her son-in-law, in reality, he was financially supporting all 3 women, putting immense economic pressure on him. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly, but Victoria was not satisfied. She felt that Raymond was not as wealthy as she had hoped and began to show disdain toward him. She constantly made things difficult for him, treating him as a worthless, incompetent man. Victoria was addicted to gambling. She frequently played mahjong and bought lottery tickets, hoping to strike it rich. When she lost money, she had no hesitation in asking Raymond for more. If he refused, she would curse and create chaos. At first, Raymond endured it, but the conflicts escalated over time. The tension reached its peak when Mary Lam became pregnant. Instead of celebrating, Victoria wanted her daughter to have an abortion. She had heard that a wealthy man was willing to support Mary financially if she divorced, so she wanted her to get rid of the child and find a new husband. Mary refused, which enraged Victoria. She secretly bought Chinese herbs and prepared them as supplements, which were actually abortion-inducing medicine. When her daughter resisted, Victoria resorted to physical abuse, trying to harm the unborn baby. Despite the violence, Mary managed to carry the pregnancy to term and safely gave birth to twin babies. One might have expected Victoria to change after becoming a grandmother, but things only got worse. She continued gambling, and whenever she lost, she would go to her son-in-law and daughter to demand money. When refused, she would go straight to the fishball noodle shop, making threats and causing disturbances. Raymond Lam had to manage his shop, take care of his family, and deal with his mother-in-law, all while feeling increasingly overwhelmed. Pushed to the edge, he felt helpless and resentful. The dangerous thought began to form in his mind. Was there a way to get rid of her permanently? And so, the tragedy began. On the morning of November 6, 1959, the peaceful atmosphere at Raymond's fishball noodle shop was disrupted by the arrival of Victoria Wong. She demanded that Raymond give her $5, a significant amount at the time. When he refused, she blatantly admitted, "I need to pay off my gambling debt from last night." The argument escalated, and in the end, Raymond reluctantly took money from the cash register and handed it to her to avoid trouble. Just a few hours later, Victoria returned, this time asking for $1. Raymond firmly refused, but she went into a frenzy, smashing things inside the shop. Frightened customers fled without paying, and his business suffered a heavy blow. Not wanting to lose more customers, he clenched his teeth and handed over $1 to his mother-in-law, trying to remain calm. After cleaning up the shop, he left for the ferry to Hong Kong to buy supplies. On the way, he coincidentally ran into Ken Chan, 36 years old, and Leo Law, 39 years old, two drug addicts who made a living through shady dealings. Seeing the frustration on Raymond's face, they pressed him for details. After hearing about Victoria's constant harassment, Ken chuckled. "If that's the case, why not take care of her?" That casual remark planted a terrifying idea in Raymond's head. Leo added, "We can help, as long as the price is right." At first, Raymond hesitated, but years of accumulated anger and resentment made him seriously consider their offer. Ken and Leo initially asked for $100, but after some bargaining, they settled on $70. The silent deal was struck. Victoria Wong had unknowingly been sentenced to death. The plan was set. That evening, they would lure Victoria to the shop and swiftly take action. That afternoon, Leo approached Victoria, inviting her to the shop under the pretense that her son-in-law had something important to discuss. Without suspicion, she agreed immediately. As darkness fell, the fishball noodle shop flickered under dim lights, with two shadowy figures lurking in the background. At the scheduled time, Victoria had not yet arrived. Growing impatient, the two men left the shop to find her and spotted her chatting with a neighbor on the street. Leo approached with a fake smile and called her back to the shop. As soon as she stepped inside, she was murdered and hidden in the kitchen. What followed was exactly what Mr. Chow had heard at the beginning of the video. The question remains, was Mary Lam, Victoria's daughter, present at the scene at the time? According to Raymond's testimony, his wife had left the house that morning, taking their twin children to the match factory dormitory to avoid trouble with her mother. She was not present when the murder took place, or at least, that was what Raymond told the police. Early the next morning, Raymond left the shop to meet Ken and Leo to discuss how to dispose of the body. However, on the way, he accidentally ran into Mr. Chow, preventing him from acting immediately. It wasn't until late at night that the three met again to finalize their plan to get rid of the corpse. They decided to use dozens of pounds of pepper to mask the foul odor. Then they wrapped the body in another layer of burlap, carried it to the stove, and placed it underneath. Raymond's fishball noodle shop was no longer just an ordinary restaurant. It was now hiding a horrifying secret. But crimes cannot stay hidden forever. Just days later, the police got involved. All three men were arrested, but strangely, Ken Chan and Luo Law were not charged with murder. Instead, they became key witnesses in the case, helping the police convict Raymond Lam alone. Under the weight of evidence, Raymond confessed everything, from the financial disputes to his sinister plan. The court sentenced him to death, but the story did not end there. The people of Pingchao sympathized with his plight and launched a petition for a reduced sentence. In the end, his sentence was commuted to 12 years in prison. The real masterminds, Ken Chan and Luo Law, remained free and unpunished. After the case, Mary Lam was unable to care for her twin children and had to send them to an orphanage. Victoria Wong's younger daughter was later taken in by relatives. Everything collapsed, a family torn apart by greed, gambling, and crime. The case may have faded into history, but its darkness haunted Pingchao for many years. This concludes our video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. A 7-month pregnant mother was brutally murdered, her unborn baby taken from her body. A few days later, her 3 remaining children mysteriously disappeared. It sounds like something out of a horror movie, yet it actually happened in September 2006 in East St. Louis, Illinois, USA. The police immediately launched an investigation, but when the truth came to light, everyone was shocked. The perpetrator was none other than the victim's best friend. The motives remain unclear, but her actions went beyond the boundaries of human morality. Don't look away. One of the most horrifying cases in human history is about to be revealed. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe to ensure you don't miss out on more chilling true crime stories. The central figures in today's story are best friends Tiffany Hall and Jamela Tunstall. They grew up in the same neighborhood in East St. Louis, Illinois. Tiffany had a strong-willed personality. She frequently clashed with her family and often had heated arguments with her mother. Beverly Cross, Tiffany's mother, once revealed that her daughter was an uncontrollable rebel, even setting the kitchen on fire as a teenager. Despite this, Jamela trusted Tiffany completely. She didn't care about Tiffany's troubled past. In 1999, at age 16, Jamela Tunstall welcomed her first child, a baby boy named Demon. Later, she gave birth to 2 more children, even in 2003 and Janella in 2004. Becoming a mother at such a young age was not easy. Jamela's life was a struggle filled with financial hardships, emotional turmoil, and immense responsibilities. She even lost custody of her children after being accused of disciplining her eldest son with a belt. But Jamela never gave up. She fought to regain custody, took parenting classes, endured social judgment, and ultimately won back her children. Meanwhile, Tiffany Hall also became a mother at 16. She soon had a second child, but her life took a dark turn in 1999 when she lost custody of her firstborn. When social workers intervened, they found the 2-month-old baby in a severely malnourished state. The child was limp like a rag doll, unresponsive to touch. The neglect was so severe that by age 5, the child was still wearing diapers and struggling with speech, only able to make incoherent sounds. In 2002, in a controversial decision, Tiffany regained custody of both daughters after Illinois prosecutors chose not to press charges against her. The Department of Children and Family Services deemed her no longer a threat to her children. This should have been a fresh start for Tiffany, an opportunity to become a better mother, but this fragile hope was quickly shattered by what happened next. At 23, Tiffany Hall spiraled further into crime. She was charged with possession of stolen credit cards, just one of many legal troubles she encountered over the years. Meanwhile, Jamela Tunstall's life took a completely different path. As Tiffany's world descended into chaos, Jamela focused on building a peaceful life for herself and her children. By 2006, Jamela was pregnant with her fourth child, eagerly anticipating the birth of a baby girl. She was filled with hope for a better future for her family. Despite their differences, the friendship between Tiffany and Jamela remained strong. Tiffany often helped Jamela take care of her children, as if she still held on to their past bond. But no one knew that a horrifying plan had already been set in motion, and a night of terror was fast approaching. On September 15, 2006, Tiffany called the police in a frantic voice. She claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage at Frank Holton Park and that the baby was stillborn. When paramedics arrived, Tiffany was clutching a lifeless newborn. She appeared utterly devastated, sobbing in despair. She was taken to the hospital along with the baby. But within minutes, doctors began to notice something wasn't right. When doctors suggested a medical examination, Tiffany immediately refused. She insisted she didn't need to be checked and just wanted to go home. This raised even more suspicion. Something was definitely wrong. As soon as Tiffany left the hospital, investigators began their inquiry. During questioning, her statements were riddled with inconsistencies. Initially, she claimed she had been attacked and assaulted, but just minutes later, she completely retracted her statement. The contradictions in her testimony only deepened investigators' suspicions. Furthermore, no one, except her boyfriend, a Navy officer, knew that Tiffany had been pregnant. Neither her family nor her friends were aware of any pregnancy. When the baby girl underwent an autopsy, doctors found no signs of trauma. The cause of death remained a mystery. Tiffany left the hospital, abandoning the baby, whom she had named Taylor H., in the morgue. But soon after, she organized a bizarre funeral for the infant. On September 21, 2006, the funeral for the baby girl was held. Just before the ceremony, Tiffany suddenly requested a postponement, claiming she needed to wait for more family members to attend. But in reality, only 2 family members showed up. She arrived 2 hours late, something completely unusual. At a funeral, people typically arrive early to pay their respects, but Tiffany didn't seem to care at all. Among the few attendees was Tiffany's boyfriend, KH, who had taken leave from his Navy duties to attend the funeral. He believed the baby being buried was his daughter. While all eyes were on the strange funeral, a new fear silently spread. No one knew where Jamela Tunstall was. She had been missing for days. No calls, no messages, no trace. Jamela's family and friends grew increasingly frantic. They kept calling, texting, and searching for her on social media. But every effort failed. Jamela had vanished into thin air, as if she had never existed. After the funeral, Tiffany had a private conversation with her boyfriend, KH. In a chilling and disturbing moment, she accidentally revealed a horrifying truth. She casually admitted, "I took the baby out of my best friend's stomach." Those words hit KH like a ton of bricks. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. How could Tiffany say something so monstrous? Everything around him seemed to spin. The puzzle pieces started falling into place, revealing a nightmare beyond imagination. KH knew he couldn't stay silent. He had to act before things spiraled further out of control. Even worse, Jamela Tunstall, Tiffany's best friend, had been missing for days. Without hesitation, KH grabbed his phone and called the police. As soon as the report was made, police immediately formed a missing person search team. 6 agonizing days passed, with Jamela's family and friends barely eating or sleeping, desperately hoping for a miracle. Then the truth finally surfaced. A patrol team discovered Jamela Tunstall's body in an overgrown field, just a few blocks from Tiffany's house. Jamela lay there, lifeless, her body horribly mutilated, her abdomen showing signs of severe trauma. Near her remains, police found a blood-stained pair of scissors, the very tool Tiffany used to cut the baby from Jamella's womb. News of the horrific crime spread like wildfire, becoming a sensational headline across major newspapers. A pregnant mother brutally murdered in an act of unimaginable cruelty. That very night, Tiffany was arrested. But instead of showing fear or remorse, she remained eerily calm, as if what had just happened was nothing out of the ordinary. In the interrogation room, Tiffany began revealing chilling details of her crime. She calmly recounted, "On the morning of September 16, 2006, Jamella had visited Tiffany's mother's house in Belleville to hang out. A heated argument broke out between them. In a fit of rage, Tiffany attacked Jamella, knocking her unconscious. Then, Tiffany bound Jamella's hands and feet with duct tape, preventing her from escaping. In a moment of sheer panic, Jamella regained consciousness and struggled desperately to break free. But Tiffany had already lost all sense of humanity. She covered Jamella's mouth with duct tape, silencing her cries for help, and dragged her into the bathroom. There, she cut the baby out of Jamella's womb, a scene too horrifying to imagine. Jamella was still alive, writhing in agony, but powerless to change her fate. Minutes later, she grew weaker and weaker until she took her last breath. A lifelong friendship had just ended in the most brutal way possible. Immediately after committing the crime, Tiffany tried to cover her tracks. She wrapped Jamella's body in a shower curtain, then dragged it to a nearby overgrown field. But the most terrifying part, this wasn't an impulsive act. It was premeditated. A week before the murder, Tiffany had secretly bought the necessary tools, a homemade birthing kit, including scissors, rubbing alcohol, latex gloves, and a syringe. This proved that Tiffany had planned the crime long before carrying it out. This was not a heat-of-the-moment killing. It was a cold-blooded execution. Even more disturbing, for months leading up to the crime, Tiffany had pretended to be pregnant, fabricating an entire story to lure her Navy boyfriend KH back home. She sewed maternity clothes, stuffed her belly to make it appear larger, and even bought baby supplies, diapers and bottles, to convince everyone she was expecting. When news of Jamella's murder and Tiffany's arrest broke, both families were thrown into a state of utter shock and disbelief. No one could comprehend how this horrifying chain of events unfolded. How could someone be this cruel? But the nightmare was far from over. As police dug deeper into the case, they uncovered an even more horrifying truth. Jamella's 3 children were also missing. No one knew where they were. No one had seen them since the day their mother disappeared. A new wave of terror spread through the community. Were they still alive? Or had Tiffany already taken their lives too? On September 22, 2006, police expanded their investigation. They searched Jamella's apartment, hoping to find clues about the missing children. Officers gathered photos of the children and shared them with the media, hoping someone would recognize them and help bring them home safely. During the investigation, Evan Collins, Jamella's partner, became a key person of interest. The police needed him to provide more details about Jamella's children and their last known whereabouts. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they confirmed that Tiffany's daughter was safe, but Jamella's 3 children were still missing. According to Evan Collins, the last time he saw the children was on September 18, just 3 days prior. That night, Tiffany came to pick up the children, claiming that Jamella had asked her to babysit. Since the 2 women were best friends, Evan saw no reason to doubt her. The children couldn't have just disappeared without a trace. Police tightened the investigation, shifting their full attention onto Tiffany. Meanwhile, Tiffany remained in custody. Under the relentless pressure of police interrogations, she finally confessed to where the children were. Tiffany's admission led police back to Jamella's apartment the next morning. None of the officers could have imagined what they were about to witness. The moment they entered, a putrid stench filled the air, hitting them like a punch to the gut. Every officer held their breath in horror. They froze in place. Something was terribly wrong. And then, the gruesome truth finally revealed itself. In the cramped apartment, the naked bodies of Jamella's 3 children were found in the most unimaginable places. 2 of them were stuffed into the washing machine. The 3rd child lay motionless inside the dryer. Their small bodies had severely decomposed after days trapped in the sealed space, unnoticed by the outside world. The sight left the entire investigation team speechless. A young officer, unable to bear the horror, ran outside and vomited. The most chilling fact? Police had actually walked past this very apartment just 1 day earlier, unaware that the 3 children's bodies were still inside. When questioned about her motives, Tiffany calmly admitted to everything, but never gave a reason for killing the 3 innocent children. To understand what really happened, we need to go back to September 18, 2006, just 3 days before the funeral, right after Tiffany had already murdered Jamella and her unborn baby. That day, Tiffany continued executing her twisted plan. She lied to even Collins, heartlessly claiming that Jamella had asked her to take the children out for the day and borrow her car. When she brought the children back to the apartment, Tiffany acted as if nothing was wrong. She looked at them and said, "It's bath time." But instead of laughter and splashing water, the bathroom, where Tiffany had murdered Jamella, became the setting for an even more horrific crime. One by one, Tiffany drowned Jamella's 3 children in the bathtub. Demon, 7 years old, Even, 2 years old, Janella, 1 year old, none of them stood a chance. Some reports indicate that Tiffany drugged the children with cough syrup before killing them, possibly to make them drowsy and unable to resist. After murdering all 3 children, Tiffany calmly dragged their bodies out and disposed of them just as we've seen in the previous segment. After committing the horrific crimes, Tiffany simply walked away, continuing her life as if nothing had happened. This inhuman act not only ended the lives of 3 innocent children, but also wiped out Jamella's entire family within a single week. By this point, Tiffany had confessed to everything. She murdered her best friend, stole her unborn baby, and mercilessly killed her 3 children. Yet, Tiffany never provided any explanation as to why she had targeted the children. On September 29, 2006, the funeral of Jamella Tunstall and her 3 children took place, leaving the community in tears. More than 700 people attended to say their final goodbyes. Within just 3 days, over $30,000 was raised to help cover the funeral expenses. But while the community mourned, the legal battle surrounding Tiffany Hall grew increasingly complex. Initially, Tiffany was only charged with the murders of Jamella and her unborn child. However, as the investigation progressed, she was officially charged with the murders of the 3 children as well. At first, Tiffany pleaded not guilty, which led to a series of psychiatric evaluations before her trial. She was initially assigned a public defender, but when the state declared its intent to pursue the death penalty, a more experienced attorney was appointed to defend her. James Gray, Tiffany's lawyer, revealed that while she was deemed mentally competent to stand trial, she suffered from severe psychological issues, with an IQ of just 70, borderline intellectual disability. What made this case even more controversial was the fact that Tiffany herself was a mother. At the time of the crimes, her 2 daughters were only 5 and 8 years old. Finally, on June 10, 2008, the trial concluded with a life sentence without parole for Tiffany Hall. The verdict reflected the unforgivable cruelty of her crimes, murdering 5 innocent lives, including Jamella and her 3 children. But even after the sentence was handed down, painful questions remained unanswered. What could drive a mother to commit such monstrous acts? In September 2008, Tiffany attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that her lawyer had failed to represent her properly. However, the court rejected her request. In 2012, she filed another appeal, requesting a new attorney, but once again, her request was denied. Tiffany refused to give up. She insisted that her lawyers had failed to thoroughly investigate her mental health condition at the time of her guilty plea. According to legal records, James Gree had not even received Tiffany's psychiatric evaluation report until 2 days after she had already pleaded guilty. This raised serious concerns over whether Tiffany had fully understood the nature of her crimes, or if she was merely a victim of untreated psychological disorders. A psychiatric report revealed that Tiffany had a long history of severe mental illnesses, including psychotic disorders, PTSD, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, and mild intellectual disability. These diagnoses sparked public debate. How should the legal system handle criminals suffering from severe mental illness? In response, the court decided to overturn the denial of post-conviction relief, meaning Tiffany could continue to appeal her case. Over the next few years, her case was repeatedly revised and reviewed, with new attorneys stepping in during 2015 and 2016. Tiffany continued requesting a new attorney, but her requests were rejected. Finally, in 2020, Tiffany won a crucial legal battle that allowed her to file another appeal for post-conviction relief. While her case remains entangled in the appeals process, at the very least, Jamella's family can find some solace in knowing that Tiffany is still behind bars. Currently, Tiffany Hall is serving her sentence at the Logan Correctional Center in Lincoln, Illinois. The case of Tiffany Hall will forever be remembered as one of the most horrifying crimes in history, not only for the monstrous brutality of the killer, but also for the many questions that may never be answered. This video concludes here. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. On the morning of February 8, 1990, the Guangzhou Police Department received an emergency call from the Tianhe police station. A street cleaner had discovered the body of a woman in an unusual position, thrown by the side of Dunhe Road. The victim was a young woman, approximately 25 years old. According to the preliminary assessment of the police, she could either be a local resident or from a neighboring province. Forensic examination confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted before her death. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation caused by a thin object resembling a fishing line. After killing the victim, the perpetrator continued with cruel actions, cutting off sensitive parts of the victim's body. Her underwear and stockings were stuffed into her private parts, a bizarre detail indicating the killer's perverse motive. Faced with the chilling crime scene, the public began to ask, what kind of motive could drive the perpetrator to commit such a heinous act? Like and subscribe to our channel to uncover the mystery behind this shocking case. At around 6 a.m. on February 8, 1990, a street cleaner working along Dunhe Road noticed a hand protruding from the bushes, about 10 meters from the main road. At first, he thought it was just a drunk person who had collapsed by the roadside after a long night. Curious, he approached, only to be horrified when he realized it was not a drunk person, but the lifeless body of a woman lying motionless in the wild grass. The victim's clothes were disheveled, her pupils were dilated, her mouth was open wide, her tongue sticking out, and her body was curled up in a fetal position. A sight that would send chills down anyone's spine. The street cleaner quickly called the police to report the crime. Less than 15 minutes later, local police arrived at the scene, cordoned off the area, and began collecting evidence. Based on the victim's physical characteristics, the police estimated that she was around 25 years old. The victim's body was partially concealed by wild grass, and her wrists showed signs of restraint by a rope. Her fingertips had bruises and scratches, indicating that she had struggled fiercely while being attacked. However, the police noticed that the crime scene lacked signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim might have been murdered elsewhere before her body was moved to this location for disposal. The autopsy results indicated that the victim had been dead for about 6 hours before being discovered, meaning the murder took place around midnight on February 7, 1990. This suggested that the killer acted late at night, taking advantage of the deserted streets to commit the crime unnoticed. At the crime scene, the police found traces of a man's shoe prints, but no signs of any vehicle tracks. This could indicate that the perpetrator had transported the body using some means before leaving the scene on foot. Recognizing the severity of the case, the Guangzhou Police Department quickly established a special task force. The police immediately launched two main investigative directions. First, they aimed to quickly identify the victim, gather information about her identity, residence, and anyone related to her. Next, they narrowed down potential witnesses by interviewing locals to find anyone displaying suspicious behavior. However, both initial investigative directions yielded no positive results. No one recognized the victim, there were no missing person reports matching the description, and no witnesses saw anything suspicious the night before. This raised the possibility that the victim was not a resident of Guangzhou but may have come from elsewhere. Additionally, the area where the body was found was a deserted road with almost no pedestrians at night. Notably, early in the morning, only a few vehicles passed through, so the body may have been left there late at night, just before dawn. However, the police found no tire marks or any vehicle traces near the scene, complicating the investigation. The perpetrator may have stopped the vehicle some distance from the crime scene and then carried the victim's body into the grass. A year passed, but the case remained unsolved and gradually fell into stagnation. The victim's identity was still unknown, and no relatives came forward to claim the unidentified body. The police began to fear that if no breakthrough was made, the case might be forgotten. But that fear did not last long, because exactly 1 year later, on February 10, 1991, another case occurred, reigniting public interest. On a road in the outskirts, residents discovered the body of a young woman, around 20 years old, with similar signs to the February 8, 1990 case. Less than 6 months later, another female body was found in the suburban area near Guangzhou, once again showing the same gruesome method of killing. According to the autopsy results, the victim had been killed before being dismembered. The perpetrator not only killed, but also dismembered the victim in a crude and unprofessional manner. Police estimated that the perpetrator took between 2 to 3 hours to dismember the body. By August 1991, after the third case occurred, Guangzhou police realized they were dealing with a real serial killer. At that time, DNA testing was not widely available. Only major cities like Guangzhou, Beijing, and Shanghai had the resources to conduct such analyses. However, forensic results led to a breakthrough. The semen samples collected from all 3 crime scenes were an exact match, confirming that the same perpetrator was responsible for all 3 murders. This case raised serious concerns, as the perpetrator did not stop after each murder, but showed a tendency to continue committing crimes. While the investigation was still ongoing, a 4th case unexpectedly occurred in October. The victim was a woman around 20 years old, whose body was tightly wrapped in a burlap sack. However, in this case, the police discovered a key witness. This witness was a local resident who reported seeing a small truck parked near the crime scene for an unusually long time on the night before the body was found. What caught the police's attention was the description of the driver. A middle-aged man with suspicious behavior who had been seen frequently in the area at night in recent weeks. Notably, the truck had no rear license plate, indicating that the driver had deliberately removed it to avoid identification. The police immediately launched a search for the suspicious truck, reviewing toll booth records, traffic cameras on major roads, and surrounding areas. Besides the truck, a burlap sack discarded near the scene was also considered a crucial piece of evidence linked to the suspect. In early March 1992, the Guangzhou Police Department launched a large-scale manhunt determined to track down the serial killer. Over 30,000 leaflets were printed and distributed, including images of the burlap sack containing the victim's body, a plea for public information, and warnings about potential danger. At the same time, police were ordered to investigate over 3,800 grain warehouses and hemp textile factories across Guangdong province and neighboring areas to trace the origin of the burlap sacks used for disposing of the victims. The investigation lasted for months. Over 4,600 burlap sacks were sent to the Agricultural Science Institute for analysis, and 1,686,000 fingerprints were examined. Finally, police managed to collect the suspect's DNA, but they were still unable to match it to a specific identity. In July 1992, the Guangzhou Public Security Bureau identified a soldier from Garrison Unit 6807 named Jiang Qide as a potential suspect in one of the cases. Jiang was immediately arrested, but after interrogation and forensic testing, he was proven innocent. Although the arrest did not yield the expected results, it led police to reassess the entire case. They realized that the perpetrator had distinct characteristics that had not been fully considered before. Based on the locations where bodies were dumped, police narrowed down the suspect's work or residence to the Xinjiao town area of Haizhu District, Guangzhou. Since all the victims were women, police hypothesized that the killer's motive stemmed from hatred towards women. By analyzing patterns from previous cases, criminal psychologists determined that the suspect was likely between 20 and 40 years old. All the murders involved brutal treatment of the victims' bodies and the insertion of foreign objects, suggesting that the perpetrator had sexual behavioral disorders. At all crime scenes where bodies were disposed of, police found tire tracks, indicating that the perpetrator used a vehicle to transport the victims. Upon re-examining the crime scenes, forensic experts discovered a critical detail. Although some victims' clothes were removed, they still wore jewelry. Based on this discovery, police decided to change their investigation strategy, shifting their focus to jewelry stores in the area. The jewelry worn by the victims looked like real gold, but was actually gold-plated alloy. This raised an important question. Why were all the victims wearing fake jewelry? In Guangdong, women generally care about appearances, and wearing fake jewelry is uncommon. Upon deeper investigation, police discovered that a group of women often wore fake jewelry to avoid being robbed. Notably, they were mostly women working in nighttime entertainment venues. The perpetrator might have targeted prostitutes or women who frequently appeared in red light districts. Most of the victims did not have household registrations in Guangzhou. Many used fake names, and they had no contact with their families. So no missing person reports were filed. Although identifying the victim's profession was a major breakthrough, police still could not find the perpetrator's identity. This caused the case to once again reach a deadlock, becoming an unsolved mystery. On the morning of September 19, 1994, Shijiao Town's police chief, Luo Guangzhou, received an emergency report from a young woman named Huang Yanhong. She reported that on the previous night, she had narrowly escaped being murdered by a strange man at a train station. Huang Yanhong recounted that she had come to Guangzhou seeking a job, but as soon as she got off the train, her wallet was stolen by a pickpocket. By that time, it was already 11 p.m., and she found herself stranded at an unfamiliar train station without any money. Suddenly, a small truck pulled up near her. The middle-aged man inside rolled down the window and asked if she needed a ride. Seeing her hesitation, he took out an old police uniform, showed it to her, and claimed that he was an officer offering her a free ride. Initially, Huang Yanhong thought she was lucky to have met a kind person. But as the truck drove into increasingly dark and desolate roads, she began to feel uneasy. Before coming to Guangzhou, she had heard about the serial murders occurring in the city. The thought gradually surfaced in her mind, making her clutch her jacket tightly as her heartbeat quickened. As the vehicle continued driving into a remote village, the darkness engulfed the road ahead. By now, her fear had reached its peak. Unable to wait any longer, Huang Yanhong risked opening the car door, jumping out and running for her life. Behind her, hurried footsteps echoed. The man was chasing after her. She ran towards a nearby garbage dump, trying to stay calm and hide in a dark corner. Her breath was rapid, but she held it in, hoping he would leave. After about 2 hours, thinking the coast was clear, she slowly stepped away. But unexpectedly, the man was still standing there, silently waiting for her to reappear. He lunged at her, grabbed her, and attempted to kill her on the spot. At that moment, car headlights flashed from a distance, and a vehicle suddenly drove past the small road. Afraid of being caught, the man immediately released her and fled into the night. After calming herself, Huang Yanhong immediately went to the police station to report the crime. Police launched an investigation right away. Through screening and analyzing testimonies, they identified the prime suspect as Luo Shubiao. When compared with the witness, Huang Yanhong immediately identified Luo Shubiao as the man who attacked her. In May 1995, police raided Luo Shubiao's house. What they found inside made everyone shudder. Dozens of women's clothing items were scattered around, along with blood-stained personal belongings hidden in drawers. More horrifyingly, when the police broke open a locked metal cabinet, they found preserved human body parts inside. DNA testing confirmed that these body parts belonged to at least 17 previous murder victims. Scattered throughout the room were mannequins or human-like figures dressed in clothes stolen from the victims, as if Luo was recreating his gruesome crimes. All the evidence collected confirmed Luo Shubiao was the serial killer that police had been hunting for years. After being arrested, Luo Shubiao admitted to killing a total of 17 victims over 4.5 years. His wife, Liu Meiting, had no knowledge of his brutal crimes. To understand his motives and the origins of his cruelty, investigators traced Luo Shubiao's past, uncovering a dark childhood and twisted thoughts that shaped his path to crime. Luo Shubiao was born on August 20, 1954, in Guangzhou, into a poor working-class family. He was an only child, introverted, and had few friends. Since middle school, he had engaged in theft, frequently stealing from classmates and neighbors, but was never caught. After graduating, he trained as a carpenter but could not hold a steady job, often quitting midway. In 1974, at the age of 20, Luo was arrested for theft for the first time and sentenced to 2 years of re-education through labor. In early 1977, Luo sneaked into the Home Appliance Research Institute intending to steal, but was caught by a female employee named Fen Liyun. Fearing arrest, he murdered her with an iron rod and then violated her corpse. However, since there were no witnesses and the police found no clear evidence, he escaped punishment. In 1979, Luo was arrested again for theft and sentenced to 3 years of re-education. While in prison, he exhibited severe, deviant behavior, including secretly stealing underwear from female inmates and guards. After being released in 1982, Luo married Liu Meiting and had 2 children. During the early years of marriage, Luo seemed to change, working diligently and becoming a model husband and father. During the day, he worked as an interior designer for a private company. At night, he worked as a truck driver, transporting grain within Guangdong province, a job that allowed him to travel frequently without raising suspicion. However, this change was just a facade. Internally, his mind was becoming increasingly twisted and perverse. He frequently watched extreme violent pornography, particularly obsessed with serial murders, such as the case of Lam Korwan, a Hong Kong killer known for dismembering his victims. These twisted thoughts drove him to seek ways to satisfy his deviant desires. At first, Luo tried to suppress his urges by collecting discarded mannequins from fashion stores. He dressed them, applied makeup, and used them to satisfy himself. But that was not enough. On the night of February 7, 1990, after driving around Xinzhou for 2 hours, he picked up a prostitute and took her to Pazhou Dairy Farm, a deserted area with no passersby. When the woman resisted fiercely, he strangled her with a fishing line, subduing her until she stopped breathing. After she became motionless, he then violated her corpse. This was his first murder, marking the beginning of his horrifying killing spree. After committing the gruesome act, Luo Shubiao dumped the victim's body by the roadside on Dunhai Street. Returning home, he was engulfed by the fear of being caught. The next day, he returned to the crime scene to check whether the body had been discovered. However, after a long time without any police movement, he gradually realized that they were only focusing on investigating people close to the victim. This allowed him to escape suspicion, giving him the confidence to continue his crimes. From February 1991, Luo Shubiao continued his crimes, always striking at night. He used a truck to transport the bodies home, hiding them in the attic, which became the site of his gruesome acts. There, he dismembered the victims, removed certain body parts, and even deliberately left traces to taunt the police. After satisfying himself, Luo stuffed the victims' bodies into sacks, oil drums, or wooden crates and dumped them in remote areas of Xinjiao town. One time, while disposing of a body, his wife, Liu Meiting, accidentally witnessed the horrifying scene. Luo quickly made up a story. He told her that it was a person who had died in a traffic accident that he had accidentally hit, and if the truth got out, he would go to jail. Shaken by her husband's plea, Liu Meiting reluctantly helped him conceal this horrifying secret, unaware that her husband was a serial killer. After each murder, Liu meticulously recorded the victim's physical characteristics, their clothing, their reactions, his physical experiences, his emotions, and the process of disposing of the bodies. He kept the diary as a trophy, frequently rereading it to relive the gruesome memories. Upon hearing that law enforcement was tightening the investigation, Luo panicked and immediately destroyed his original records, but later rewrote them in a coded format. On the night of May 25, 1992, Luo was arrested by Tianhe District Police on charges of soliciting prostitution. He was sent to a labor camp for 6 months. There, he read the investigative report from the City Public Security Bureau about the serial murders. Realizing that the police were getting very close to solving the case, Luo decided to escape from the labor camp. He stopped killing for 6 months to avoid detection. However, in March 1994, he could no longer control himself and resumed his crimes, killing 4 more prostitutes before being arrested in September of the same year. On January 18, 1995, Luo Shubiao was tried at the Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court. With overwhelming evidence, he was sentenced to death for murder. 2 days later, on January 20, 1995, Luo Shubiao was executed by firing squad, ending his horrific 4-year killing spree. The case was closed with widespread public approval. Many believed that the sentence was completely justified given his crimes. The victims' families expressed their sorrow, but also felt a sense of relief that justice had been served. Thank you for following this story. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to avoid missing more horrifying and mysterious crime cases. Remember, no matter